Hi House Corvo, and welcome back to the shield making tutorial, part 3. Today is essentially the final assembly before you go into the last touch-ups and stuff. And today we'll be taking this and assembling it all together into a almost completely functional shield. To do this, we have some of our tools over here, and let's just jump straight into it. So the first thing that we're going to start off with today is we're going to be taking these edges that you see here and making them nice and flush. And the way we do that is with our best friend, craft foam. You can find this, I mean, honestly, literally anywhere. Even pick and saves have them, and they're not even other types of stores, so it's perfect. You can find this stuff anywhere. It's pretty cheap, and it's great for anything, any detailing work you want to do, like anything like that. And we'll be taking them. We'll be using our industrial adhesive that you've seen several times on the channel before in this tutorial, gluing it to the edges here. Now, with this step, something that's relatively important is that you are making sure that the edge doesn't go tremendously over the edge of the shield. Because if that happens, well, then you just kind of got this weird flap of craft foam hanging off the end that isn't really doing anything good for the shield or doing anything meaningful. And give me 1 second, and we'll get that open. There we go. And let's get straight into it. So we got our first piece here, and I'm just going to show you guys how to do the first step. And what I highly recommend you do is you do a dry fit with this, because I don't know how many times I've glued this, gotten to this part, started gluing, and realized that I don't know how far down to go. So you set it to one spot, take a Sharpie, mark wherever you're going to start your piece at, or where the previous one was, and you wrap this around the edge, and you find the spot where you're going to end at. Now, if you don't know, when you heat up the glue on here, it's going to heat up the foam, and this is actually going to stretch just a little bit. And so what you want to do is you want to give yourself just a little bit more room. And if you go over it a little bit, the whole thing's going to get glued with these anyway, so it's not a big deal. Now I've got your base, and we're going to go ahead and start applying our glue. Now, I recommend anytime you're doing these, you have this on some sort of material. You don't care if it gets covered in glue. I've just got a piece of scrap cardboard here. And I also recommend you use a thinner brush, because otherwise you're just slathering glue all over places you don't need it to be. Take your dap and apply it smoothly as you can onto the surface of this piece here. And with this process, the very nature of it, the way it is, you're gonna get glue on your hands. You can probably already see I've got a bunch on my hand from the last shield I just did. I want to make sure this covers every spot of this. There you go. Then we'll move to the shield, and we will go ahead and glue this part of the shield. Now you're going to get a little bit running over the edges, and while you do want to try to minimize that, it's not going to be a big deal, because in the next video we will be going over all the plasti dipping to get the shield actually functional. And any extra glue coming off the edge like that, you're not even really going to see. Just try to minimize it, because it's a waste of glue. You don't want to get glue on your fancy, beautiful House Corvo hoodies or anything like that. So, okay. And we will set that down. Put this down so the glue doesn't get anything else. Take your handy-dandy industrial hair dryer, the heat gun, and you come over. You apply your heat to the piece. Now, when you're doing this part, it's pretty important that you apply the heat gun almost vertically down, just because this does blow air out, and it will blow your piece away. And then you'll be running down the yard trying to catch your piece of craft foam, and getting glue and dirt and stuff all in the glue, and make the bond less strong. Just makes a mess. So keeping it vertical on that step is important. Now, do the same thing for the glue on your shield. And if you've got any major gaps that you're worried about, or any part of it's uneven from when you sanded it before, you can go over those areas with a little bit more glue to, reinforce that section, make it a little bit thicker. You don't want to overdo it, Because if you put too much of the liquid glue back into the glue that's already there, it will start to make the reaction reverse just a little bit. So you don't want to overdo it. Then you take your piece, and you apply it to the end. And when you cut these out, it's okay if they don't go completely to the end. It's better to have them be a little bit less than a little bit more. And like I said, when we plasti dip it, those edges are going to get filled in a little bit anyway. And for the most part, you're not even going to know. I'll make this all nice and smooth. And there we go. Now, I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to do the rest of the shield. It's pretty self-explanatory to do the rest of the edge. And we'll catch up back with you when that's done. Hello everyone, welcome back. And as you can see, we have our new edging done. Nice and pretty on here. Don't worry about the color, it's all going to get covered with plasti dip. But yeah, now that's done. We're moving on to the next part. Probably the most important part. Making the handle. Now, I've seen a lot of people, I know a lot of people, who they will take one of those hand trowels and that will be their handle. And there's several reasons why that's a terrible idea. Number one reason is because there's a lot of LARPs and other groups that they won't pass your shield to be used if there's any piece on it that isn't plastic and foam. So having any metal in there is going to immediately make you invalid for that. Another reason is because typically they're not very deep, so having your hand wrap around that handle is going to be harder for anyone with bigger hands or anyone in armor, and our shields have a lot more depth in the boss. And the third reason is because if you're having a metal sheet inside of foam, then the second that that foam, the shield gets hit, that metal is going to be putting more shear stress on the inside of the shield and is more likely to rip out of the shield. And then your shield's ruined, and now you've got a sharp trowel flying at your face. So I would personally advise against doing that. So instead we're going to be using some PVC pipe and this lovely dap here to secure it on. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to make these kind of anchor pieces that we're going to be putting on here. And you can kind of shape these however you want. We just do them like this. And it's nice because these pieces you can really do out of pretty much any scrap foam you have lying around. And we'll just go ahead and cut this piece out after tracing it. Don't cut your fingers off. Need those for things. And then we'll move on. Hope everybody is enjoying the last house practice videos that were uploaded about a week ago. We do have more videos that will be underway. If you haven't already seen our hoodies that we have available, you can see on our YouTube channel we have a couple posts and a couple other videos with them in there, and they are now available on our Etsy page. Alright, now we got these two base pieces. They can be a little rough. It's not really a big problem. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to do a little bit of sanding to clean these pieces up, just make them a little bit prettier. And we'll go ahead and speed through this. And now they're nice and cleaned up a little bit. Again, if these parts are imperfect, it's not going to matter because these are all going to get plasti dip, and you're the only one going to see them when you're using your shield. Now we'll move on to the fun part. We'll move on this. So we're going to be using our PVC here. Now, essentially what you'll be doing, and you'll see it here, is you're going to have the part where you grip, and you can use a couple different widths, whatever is comfortable for hand size, and we'll be kind of heating up the ends of this to flatten them out so that they stay adhered to the shield nice and even. Now, when you do that, one side is going to be more flat up against the edge of the pipe than the other. That's the part that's going to be up against here, and you want to make sure that when you squish the ends down that they're even with each other. If you want to, or because your boss is too small or for whatever reason, You could have this raised up a little bit by having, you know, another one of these sets and then putting your piece on here. Would make it a little less structurally sound, but with this stuff you'll be fine. If you want to do that, you can, but generally we like to have the handle close to the inside of the shield as possible. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to have to cut this down because we don't need the full length of this piece. We'll lay this out, and you want to make sure that you're not having the piece all the way up against the edge of where your little backing anchors are going to be. You want to make sure it's actually in the middle so that there's enough glue with the foam contacting the rest of the foam to make sure that it actually stays secured. Now to cut the pipe, we're going to use one of these, little pipe cutter tool. If you've never used one of these before, I'm sure you can go find one at any sort of hardware store. You just attach it like that, tighten it a little bit, and spin her around. Tighten it down a bit more, spin it around again. Eventually you'll feel it go right through. Nice even cut. These pieces will pop right out. Nice and easy, look at that. I'm just going to mark where our actual handle is going to be. And now, on to the fun part. Now, this is the part that is, if you do it wrong, will waste your piece of PVC. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be heating up these ends with our heat gun here, getting these bits nice and soft, and squishing them down flat so that they'll fit into the shield nicely. Now, a couple things. If you don't know, PVC is not really supposed to be heated up like this. And when it does, it breaks. When you get heated up a bit, it does break down slightly, and it releases some toxic gases if you burn it. So try not to burn it. And you're not heating it up hot enough to really cause a problem like that, but if you're not careful, you can burn it, and then it'll damage the PVC, which is the more important part, and then, you know, compromise the structural integrity of the plastic. And it will be hard to tell that it's getting heated up, and it will be hard to tell when it's getting soft, but eventually you'll see it start to warp slightly. And once you see it start to swell like that, then it's really softened up, and then you can squish it down. Now this is going to take a while for this to happen, so I'll go ahead and keep doing this on camera for you guys, and I'll just speed it up in post. And then you start to see the kind of shape we're going for here. Now I'm going to heat this up one more time and try to get it a little bit smoother, because you can see it's not quite re-sticking to itself. And getting this to actually be done nicely is not an exact science, but you'll get it there eventually. And there we go. Now it's still hot, but it's good. And you can kind of see what I mean by it being flat and up against the edge of this side. And this is the part that's going to actually make contact with the shield. And yeah, and then, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and get this a little bit more even, finish the other side, and we'll go ahead and attach it. Pause. Welcome back. As you can see, we got our piece ready to go. Now if you'll see here, we do have a little bit of a weird twist in here. As long as the back of this is mostly flat, it'll be fine. This stuff is magic. It's not going anywhere. So, I've got on our shield, everything kind of base laid out. Now we're going to get to gluing. So, Gonna glue down our pieces. And, whoops, look at that. I dripped a little bit. Like I said before, that's fine. All this is gonna get plasti dipped. It's not gonna cause a problem. Apply our glue to these pieces. Set these down. Make sure it doesn't roll off the table. Apply our glue to the space we are gluing to. There we go. Heat it up. Make sure that glue is nice and tacky. Do the same thing to our piece of PVC. Now you might be thinking, oh, aren't you just going to heat up and start to melt the PVC again? The glue reaction from the heat happens before the PVC starts to melt. So that's not going to be a problem. Set that down. Go ahead and press that on. Give it a couple seconds, and there we go. Now, it's going to look not quite applied all the way, and that's because there's not a perfect connection between these two pieces, which is part of the reason for the next step. Now we're going to glue these on. And these, the glue point that these things actually have, the PVC is going to bond better to this piece of foam, and this piece of foam is going to really have a strong bond with the rest of the piece of foam and functionally hold the piece down so that the glue never really gets pulled away from the PVC on either side. And that is essentially the principle we're working with when it comes to these steps here. And this anchoring system, if you've seen the other shields we have, we've used them for a few years using this exact method. And then we have some other shields that aren't the standard kite shields that you've seen us use that are way older than those shields, using essentially the same method. And the PVC in the handle will break from being old before the actual foam is going to rip apart, or the glue is going to come undone. So this method of construction, if you do it right, will stay nice and strong for a long period of time. Down. Just like that. And there you go. And now that's on there. Now, once I get the other one on, you'll see that this is, I mean, even holding just one piece on, this is already pretty strong on there. And once the glue has a couple hours to set, this piece is not going anywhere. So I'll go ahead and do the other side, and then we'll get to the boss, and then that will be it for the day. Go ahead and pause. And look at that. Now our handle is on, good and strong. And even though this glue has only had a couple minutes, maybe, like, this is already strong enough that I can hold it like this, and I'm not worried about it coming undone. It is going to peel up a little bit on here. That's going to happen. But as long as you got a good amount of space around the edges, it's not going anywhere. And once you give it a couple hours to set, 8 hours or so, this glue is never going anywhere. And now we will do the final assembly step. Now this one can be the most finicky, because if it's not lined up right, you'll have your boss sticking in weirdly to your handle. Because or if it does line up, if you cut something wrong or weird, it may look kind of wonky on the outside, but looks like we did this pretty good, where this looks pretty nice and centered. And we will go ahead and get this ready. So as we do, you line it up on the inside, make sure that it's at least mostly centered on the outside, and we will go ahead and do quick line, mark where it's going to line up, and you can still do a little bit of tweaking if you need to. Go ahead and do a little bit of trace. Now we'll go ahead and apply our glue to the back side of the boss. And when you put the boss on, if it is a little crooked, you can, before you actually like press it down nicely, you can, you still have a couple seconds before you actually push it all the way down that you can still move it a little bit. And if it's a little weird, I'll show you guys a cool trick you can do to make it not look as off if it is a little off center. But with the nature of these things and hand cutting and everything like that, especially if it's your first time making one of these shields, it's gonna be a little bit off. It's not going to be perfect. But I'd be willing to bet good money that historically shields and everything was a little bit imperfect. Especially going through battles and everything, you're not really going to care if your shield boss is, you know, a millimeter to the left. Because as long as it stops the arrows coming at you, that's all you're really going to care about at the end of the day. Most of the time, these imperfections you're going to see are only going to be seen if somebody has their eyes directly on your shield. And at that point, just kill them. In LARP. I mean, kill them in LARP. Let's make that distinction. We'll go ahead and heat up our glue, as we've done a million times before. Do it for the actual boss itself. Make sure that reaction is nice and even. Make sure every square inch of that applied glue is activated. And now we will go ahead, put this on. Make sure it's centered as much as we can. If your shield has a slight warp in it, you may have to bend it a little bit to make sure it actually makes contact with all of the boss. Obviously, you don't want to go too extreme, but you'll be able to tell when the whole boss has actually got a good weld with all of the base of the shield. And you might have a little bit coming in from the inside of your handle hole, a little bit, but in general, most of that space is going to be taken up by your knuckles in the center, so if there's a little bit of overlap, that'll be okay. At the end of the day, the internals of this space is probably the least important part of this entire shield. Okay? And at this point, if you wanted to, you could call this shield ready to get plastic dipped. You could. However, we like to add our little ring you saw us make in the last video, and this is for a couple reasons. I mentioned before, one, historically they had a sort of ring that was part where it was attached actually to the shield. We also do it because it just looks like an artistic thing that we like to apply. But another thing you can use it for is you can, if you think your shield boss is a little bit off center or something about your shield just looks a little crooked, I would be willing to bet you if you did this by hand that this is probably a little crooked too. And if you align it correctly, you can offset whatever little bit of crookedness you have in your shield boss and take advantage of an optical illusion to just make it look a little bit less crooked. And that's another reason why we like to have the rings, is it allows us to have that flexibility and make everything just look a little bit cleaner. So now, do a quick trace. So we don't apply glue or we don't need to. We'll do a little bit of a mark so we actually have the thing line up where we did our dry fit. Take it off. We'll apply our glue once again. And this is the final step of this video to have a fully assembled shield. Now, there's only one more step after this whole video, so your shield can actually be used in LARP combat. And that step will be shown in the next video, because unfortunately, some of us need to sleep. That step is probably one of the messiest and least scientific
because Plasti-Dip sometimes has a will of its own, where it will dry out in different levels, and it's not really easy to apply and sometimes, and you got to make sure you get it in all the nooks and crannies so that the whole shield's actually like sealed and everything. Because the big reason that foam weapons decay is when the foam isn't properly sealed. And that's what makes foam weapons decay faster, is when that exposed foam gets hit and makes contact with things, especially with water and cold, things like that. So keeping that Plasti-Dip layer on your whole shield is one of the most important parts. And that's why getting the Plasti-Dip done correctly is so finicky. Is because if you don't do it right, you're not going to have a working shield. At least not for very long. We are just about finished with applying this glue for the ring. Just finish up the last little bits here. Put a little bit around the actual boss itself, just so that the ring can actually apply to that as well. We'll go ahead and we'll keep this up. And we'll heat up our ring as well. And there we go. All right. Line up our points. Put this on. Make sure it slides all the way down. Press it on super glue. Pick it up. Make sure it's actually pressed down all the way. Good and tight weld. And it's foam. You can beat it up a little bit, trying to make sure it gets on there if you need to. How many times my neighbors will be walking down the street, look at me just doing this in the corner, give me a weird look. It's a great time. And with that, we have a completely assembled shield. Now, the last thing I'm going to tell you is that this is also the stage where if you wanted to do any sort of physical embossing or embellishing to this with your craft foam that we use for the edges here. If you want to do anything like that, this would be the stage where you would do it, because you don't want to try to apply anything else to the foam after you Plasti-Dipped, because you're applying glue to Plasti-Dip then, and that doesn't really mix. So if you wanted to do, if it was a shield without a boss, or even on the boss you wanted to put a bird or some symbols or a cross or anything like that on here, this is the stage you would do that with the actual craft foam to make it three-dimensional. But until the next video, this has been House Corvo, and I'll see you next time.